I'm working on this John Deere 110 garden tractor. This is part 9 of a multi-part series. In the last video, I got the ignition system together and adjusted the points. After that, I got the engine bolted to the frame. Now you're looking at the bottom of the tractor again. I took this rear belt off to remove tension from the front belt. That let me get the engine bolted in position without the belt pulling on one side. Now I need to get it back in place. I'm going to rotate the engine a bit to see if that variable speed pulley wants to change position. It's not changing much. I guess that's where it wants to be. This belt guide goes on next. If this thing's not on there, your transmission will keep turning when you push in the clutch, and you'll be grinding your gears when you try to put it in gear. Well, I don't like that. The top arm looks like it's about where it should be, but this bottom arm is touching the belt. It needs to be lower. So I'm going to have to bend that bottom part. I'm looking at the bottom of this belt guide here, and I want it to line up with the top of that pulley in there, because at some speed the belt will be at the top of that pulley, and you don't want the belt rubbing on the belt guide. When this belt is at the top of that rear pulley, it'll be about here. I like to see the belt guide parallel to the belt when it's in this position. Now looking at the bottom, I want to see the same thing. At some speed, this belt will be at the edge of this pulley, so the belt will be way down here. This thing has to be low enough to not touch the belt. That moved it some, but not far enough. It touches the frame, so I can't move it enough to bend it far enough. I'm going to use this big screwdriver and leverage off the pulley so I can push down in a different place. That moved it some. That looks pretty good there. I should have had the camera a little bit higher so you can eyeball that properly. If you look at the bottom finger, it's been rubbing hard for a while. Not only is all the paint rubbed off, but I can feel a slight groove there from the belt. Now before I get any more parts on, I'm going to spray some WD-40 on everything. Next, I'm going to clean up this carburetor. If the rubber parts are still good, I might be able to get it going without a carb kit. That's a pretty thick layer of stuff. I need some needle nose pliers to get that pin out. The gasket is pretty hard, and it's stuck on there pretty good. And the O-ring seal is hard. It's gonna come out in pieces. So I'll be trying another one of those new imported carburetor kits again. I don't see a hole in there. Yep, there's a hole. I thought it was plugged, but that looks okay. I'm gonna remove both mixture screws. To remove the float needle seat, I ground down the outside of a cheap socket. Now it's a thin wall socket, so it'll fit down into that casting area. This throttle lever is rusty on top. I'll clean that with the wire brush. This carburetor has a pretty thick layer of crud on it. I'm going to clean the worst part off with some gasoline before I soak it in the carburetor cleaner. That just makes the carb cleaner last longer. Make sure there's no more parts in the bottom of the pan. And now I'm going to wipe everything down. But that was not in view of the camera, so we'll skip that part. This is the carburetor cleaner I use. Berryman's Chem Dip. It has a basket in the can. I put the float under other stuff so it won't float. The bolt don't need to go in. I'll wire brush that. It's been about 2 hours. If you leave it in overnight, it'll discolor the casting. This Chem Dip stuff is pretty thick. It don't just dry up with compressed air. I spray the parts with regular carb cleaner and blow them dry to remove the Chem Dip. That noise in the background is rain on the metal roof. I can see all the way through where the main needle goes, so that's good. There's a bunch of holes at the big end of this long needle. Make sure they're not blocked. And there's a hole near the small end of this needle. That has to be clear too. This carburetor body's not clean enough yet. I'm going to scrape off some of the chunks and put it back in the cleaner. That wire brush has grease in it, so that just made it worse. I gotta clean that off and start over. Part of the air cleaner gasket is stuck on here. I'll scrape that off. I'm going to wire brush the top of these brass adjustment screws, and both of the springs are rusted on one end. I'll wire brush the spring by putting it on this bolt so I can hold on to it. On the brass adjustment screws, you only want to wire brush the top and the threads. Try to avoid all the holes and stay away from the small end. You don't want to change the shape of the tip at all. This has been soaking for 2 hours again. I have a better can of carburetor cleaner to blast it with. The other one had a clogged nozzle. That looks pretty clean now. The choke lever's a little hard to move. I'm going to spray some WD-40 in it. That helped it some. I'll go with that. This is ready to put back together. I have a carburetor kit that I got online. There's an O-ring and a washer. The other seat had a washer, so maybe this goes on the seat. It fits too loose on the seat. And it's too big to fit down into that machined flat where the seat goes. Okay, maybe the O-ring goes on the seat. And maybe the washer fits this bolt that holds the bowl on. Yeah, that looks right. I'm going with the O-ring on the seat. Yeah, that's not wanting to start in the hole. I need to make sure it's going straight. Well, I've seen this one other time. They machined the threads before they machined the bottom. Then when they machined the bottom, it messed up the threads. I have a threading die here that's the right size, but since it's the start of the thread that's bad, the threading die won't get started straight. So I have a thread file. Each of the 4 sides has teeth that fit into the threads, and they're all different sizes. So you have to pick the side that has the thread pitch that matches whatever you're working on. I'll need an anvil so I can push down on it. That's getting better. Make sure you're using the right part of the thread file. That looks pretty good. Well, it starts in the hole now, but won't go any farther. I'm going to take this O-ring back off so I can work on it some more. And since it started into the hole, maybe it'll start into this threading die. Yeah, that feels like it's going good. Okay, that probably fixed it. I want to make sure there's no burrs on here from the threading die. I'll try it first without the O-ring. That fits good. So now I should be able to put on the O-ring and screw it right in there. That was a bigger deal than it should have been. I don't know how you're going to avoid it though. Just gotta fix it and move on. So I'm ready to put the rest of this together. The O-ring gasket goes in next. This one has a little piece of rubber stuck to it. That came off okay. Not a problem. Then the flat gasket goes over that. Need the needle valve in there. And to set the float level, I'm going to take this flat gasket off. It just gets in the way of what I want to see. This kit has a new float pin in it. I had to get the dirt off of there. And now I want to see the float parallel to the gasket surface. The float's a little high, so I'm going to bend this tab down a little bit. That looks good. The float should be parallel to the gasket surface. Now I can put the flat gasket back on. Make sure the float moves freely. And make sure the gasket's lined up when you put the bowl on. Now I need to get the old washer off of this bolt. It's pretty well mashed on there. I'm gonna have to mangle it to get it off. That all looks good. This is the main mixture needle. Make sure the little holes are not plugged up. Turn it in till it bottoms out. Don't put any torque on it. You just want to feel where it touches, then back it out 1.5 turns. This is the idle mixture needle. There's no holes in it. Just make sure it's clean. Turn it in until you feel where it touches and back it out 1 turn. And that's it. All these parts in the pan got replaced with new ones. Just to make sure nothing's bound up inside, you want to shake it a little to make sure the float can move freely. Then if you hold it upright and blow into the fuel inlet, you should hear the air flow. Turn it upside down, the needle should seat, so you should not hear the airflow. Turn it back upright, and you should hear the airflow. That part works. Well, that's as far as I'm going this time, and here's what it looks like. I got the carburetor rebuilt. It's ready to go on. And I got this belt guard in place and adjusted properly. Next time I'll probably try to get more parts back onto the engine. Alright, that's it.